Hello guys, welcome back. I am Ashish and today we will be continuing with our module 2 administrative thought and we will be continuing with classical theory. We have already seen scientific management and scientific management movement. We have already dealt with Henry Fayol in classical theory. Today we will be dealing with Gulick and Urwick. These are two thinkers of classical theory. So before that, a small update. You can now download these PPTs from the links given in the description of this video. Also watch the previous videos because I will definitely be using some terms and definitions which I have already dealt with in the previous sessions. So moving on with our classical theory now. Gulick and Urwick are the two thinkers of classical theory. We'll learn about them today. Luther Gulick and Lyndall Urwick are the names. The classical theory reached its zenith in 1937 when Gulick and Urwick released their papers on science of administration. So Gulick and Urwick released in 1937. We have seen this in our first slide of session of Henry Fayol that classical theory reached its zenith in 1937 when papers on science of administration was published by Gulick and Urwick. These two classical thinkers further elaborated on the ideas of Henry Fayol. So Henry Fayol gave us 14 principles. We have already learnt about it. What Gulick and Urwick did was they elaborated further on those 14 principles and they came up with more exhaustive list of principles of administration. Gulick and Urwick had rich experience in the working of the civil service, military organizations and industrial undertakings. So they have worked in various fields. They have worked in civil services, they have worked in military organizations and they have worked in industrial undertakings. It is because of this that one finds continued references to discipline and efficiency in their writings. So their writings mainly focus on discipline and efficiency, and it is because of their varied experiences in various fields that we find that. They even borrowed certain concepts like line and staff from military organization. Now what is line and staff in military organization? So military consists of commander-in-chief and below commander-in-chief there are generals, colonels, lieutenants. These are all line authorities. Line authority means the scalar chain or the hierarchy that we have learnt. It is the line of authorities like commander-in-chief, general, colonel, lieutenant. These are the line authorities. And what are staff authorities? That which help the line authorities in executing their tasks more efficiently. For example, in military organizations, staff authorities are agencies which are concerned with support and transport, kitchen services, medical services, the people who take care of food, the people who take care of medicines, veterinary services. These are all staff services. They help the line services in executing their tasks more efficiently and more effectively, but they themselves have no direct play in the field as such, in the war as such. So these are all the staff agencies, and line agencies are nothing but the hierarchical line of authorities, and staff are those people who help the line in executing their tasks more efficiently and effectively. So what Gulick and Urwick did was they borrowed this concept of line and staff from military organizations and they applied it to civil organizations. They were greatly influenced by the machine model of man developed by Taylor. So as we have already seen in Taylor's lecture, Taylor basically gave us a mechanistic model. He considered man as an economic man who was mainly motivated only by money. So Gulick and Urwick were greatly influenced by this machine model of man or the mechanistic model of man as developed by F.W. Taylor. So moving on. Importance to the structure of organization. Gulick and Urwick, they both gave more importance to the structure of organization, the formal structure, rather than the functions that are performed inside the structure. We'll see how. Gulick and Urwick stressed on the importance of the structure of organization while almost neglecting the role of men in organization. They did not consider the humanistic side of the organization. This is the common drawback of all the classical thinkers. We have seen this in criticism of Taylor also, of Henry Fayol also, and we will see this in criticisms of Gulick and Urwick also, that they have neglected the human side of the organization. They gave more importance to the physical structure of the organization, the formal structure of the organization, and they did not give more importance to the role of men in organization. In this context, Urwick remarks, it is impossible for humanity to advance its knowledge of organization unless the factor on structure is isolated from other considerations, however artificial such an isolation may appear. So while building an organization, there are various considerations that you consider. What Urwick says is, structure is one of those considerations and you isolate that consideration from other considerations. As you can see, it is impossible to advance its knowledge of organization unless the factor on structure is isolated from other considerations. So you have your set of considerations while you are building an organization. Isolate your factor of structure from all those other considerations because structure is more important and other considerations are not as important as structure is. So all your considerations on one side and structure on one side. Isolate structure from other considerations. Only then your knowledge of organization can be advanced. As you can see, it is impossible to advance your knowledge of of organization unless the structure is isolated from other considerations. However artificial such an isolation may appear, if that isolation appears artificial to you, if that isolation appears mechanistic to you, so be it. However artificial it appears, it needs to be separated out, it needs to be isolated. This is what Urvik says with respect to structure of organization. He conceived organization mainly as a designing process and felt that lack of design is illogical, cruel, wasteful and inefficient. So basically organization is nothing but a designing process. This is what Urvik says. So structure is important. Hence he observed, for this reason the mechanistic parallel can be very helpful in discussing organization. As we have seen, many critics have criticized the classical theory as mechanistic model. What Urvik says is the mechanistic parallel that you are drawing for our theory, for this reason the mechanistic parallel can be very helpful in discussing organization, because they say the structure is more important. So if you say that our model is artificial, so be it, our model is mechanistic, so be it, but the mechanistic parallel is important in discussing organization. Another name for it is the engineering approach. So what we are employing is the engineering approach, and structure of organization is important. This is how they laid more importance to the structure of organization. I hope you understand now. Moving on to the principles. There are some principles that Gulick and Urvik laid down. We'll see what these principles are now. So Gulick gives us 10 principles of organization. There are more principles in upcoming slides. For example, Urvik gave us 8 principles and he further gave us more 29 principles. So there are more principles in upcoming slides. We'll learn about them all. So in this slide we'll learn about 10 principles of Gulick. These 10 principles are division of work, basis of departmental organization, and these 3, and then these. As you can see, these 3 principles of 3, 4 and 5, coordination through hierarchy, deliberate coordination and coordination through committees, these basically focus on coordination. Coordination has been dealt very deeply by Gulick. He feels that every organization should have coordination, should have harmony among workers and also harmony between workers and management. So coordination was one of the most important principles that Gulick emphasized on. He also focused on other principles, and most of these principles we have seen in Fayol's lecture, like division of work. We have seen what division of work means, what specialization means. So if you have not seen Fayol's lecture, please go back and watch Fayol's principles. We have dealt with many of those principles like unity of command in Fayol's session. In upcoming slides we will deal with those principles only which we have not dealt with in Fayol's session. And as I already told you, we will see some more principles by Urvik also in upcoming slides. So what you have to do is not remember these principles by heart, but know what they actually mean. Now why I am saying this is because UPSC does not ask you list all the 10 principles of Gulick or list all the 8 principles of Urvik. UPSC does not ask such static questions. UPSC asks dynamic questions. For example, they might give you this principle of basis of departmental organization, which is an important principle by Gulick, and they might ask you to elaborate on this. So you must know what basis of departmental organization means, you must know what division of work means, you must know what decentralization means. So you must know about all of these principles, but it is not necessary for you to remember these principles by heart, like these are the 10 principles given by Gulick or 8 principles as given by Urvik. Now if you do remember this, it is well and good, it is very good, and it is obviously better for your preparation. But if you are not able to remember these principles, please do not worry about it. Just remember what these principles stand for. For example, if you get a question in exam about line and staff or delegation or span of control, you must know what span of control means, what line and staff means. So we'll deal with all of these in our future slides. Among these 10 principles, according to Gulick, the most important is the division of work. We have seen this in Fayol's session also, that all across the classical theory we will find that division of work is the most important principle as propagated by the classical theorists. So Gulick also laid most importance on division of work or specialization. Thus he wrote, work division is the foundation of organization. Obviously division of work is most important, it is the foundation of organization. Indeed, the reason for organization, division of work and integration are the bootstraps by which mankind lifts itself in the process of civilization. So there should be division of work and there should be integration of those divided works. For example, let's say a shoemaking factory which has divided its work between designing of shoes, stitching of shoes and polishing of shoes. There should be integration of these works too, so that the final product, that is the shoe, comes out. Moving on. Gulick's 7 elements of administration. Now we have already dealt with this. Gulick said that there are 7 elements or functions, and these are nothing but post-cob. We have dealt with post-cob model in our very first session of meaning, scope and significance. We know that every letter stands for something, like P stands for planning, O for organization, S for staffing, D for directing, CO stands for coordinating, R for reporting, and B for budgeting. So these are the 7 elements of administration that Gulick gives us. We saw 10 principles of organization, that is different. Those are the principles of organization that defines the structure of organization, and these are the 7 elements of administration. These are the functions that executive perform: planning, organization, staffing, directing, coordinating. And these are pretty simple words. Planning means, what you know is planning. It is nothing but working the broad outline of things, that is planning. Organizing is nothing but establishment of formal structure to achieve your goals. Staffing means recruitment, hiring and firing of personnel. Directing means making decisions and issuing orders. Coordinating means coordinating harmony between everything, so that is nothing but coordinating. Reporting means informing your superiors, giving reports, annual reports, monthly reports, reporting to your superiors, that is nothing but reporting. Budgeting is nothing but fiscal planning. Accounting and all such stuff is nothing but budgeting. So these are all very simple terms, and these are 7 elements of functions which are performed by executives. These are the 7 elements of administration, which is nothing but post-cob. And what we saw in previous slide were 10 principles of organization. So moving on, now we come to Urvik's 8 principles of organization. As Gulick gave us 10 principles, Urvik gave us 8 principles, and these 8 principles are nothing but first is principle of objective. These are very simple. Now, as I have already told you, you need not remember these as they are in order, like these are the 8 principles of organization as given by Urvik, because UPSC will never ask you list down all the 8 principles by Urvik. If you remember these principles by heart, it is very good for you. If you are not able to remember them, please do not worry about it, but understand what these principles stand for. For example, principle of objective, it is very simple. What it stands for? It stands that an organization should have an expressed purpose, that an organization should have an objective. Every organization should have an objective is nothing but principle of objective. So you should know what each principle stands for, what is the crux of each principle. You should know that. If you do not remember these in order as 8 principles of Urvik, it's fine, but it is important for you to remember what these stand for. The principle of correspondence, what this means it, at all levels, authority and responsibility must be coterminous and co-equal. We have dealt with this in a different form in 14 principles of Fayol. If you remember, there was the second principle of authority and responsibility. What Fayol said was that if you give some responsibility to your subordinates, you should give them proper amount of authority to execute those responsibilities. If you do not remember this, please visit 14 principles of Fayol. We have dealt with authority and responsibility in that session. So principles of correspondence is nothing but same. It says that at all levels, authority and responsibility must be coterminous and co-equal. The next is principle of responsibility, which is nothing but the supervisors must take absolute responsibility for the work of their subordinates. Accountability must lie with the supervisors. Scalar principle, we have dealt with this many times in Fayol's session also, in Taylor's session also. What this means is nothing but the hierarchical structure, the top-down model of organization. This is nothing but the scalar principle, a pyramidal structure of organization. Please visit previous sessions to know about it in more detail. Principle of span of control, we'll learn about principle of span of control in detail in future slides, so we'll deal with this over there, so do not worry about this over now. Principle of specialization, this is nothing but principle of division of work. We have seen this in Fayol session, we have seen this in our 10 principles of Gulick, and as I have already told you, division of work or specialization is the running theme across the classical theory. All the classical theories consider division of work or specialization as the most important principle of organization. The next is principle of coordination. It is nothing but coordination among employees and between employees and management. The other one is principle of definition. It means everything should be clearly and precisely defined. As you can see, a clear prescription, definition in writing of duties, authority and responsibility of each position and its relationship with other positions. So everything should be clearly defined, everything should be in writing, all the duties, responsibilities and authorities, everything should be defined. This is nothing but principle of definition. These are the 8 principles of organization that Urvik gives us. So moving on, what Urvik later did was he revised his 8 principles and he came up with 29 principles. and do not worry, you do not have to remember these principles by heart. You just have to know that Urvik revised his own principles and he later came up with 29 principles of organization. So later in 1943, as we have seen in 1937 the papers of Gulick and Urvik were released, so later in 1943 Urvik published his most famous book, The Elements of Administration, and in this book he enunciated the set of 29 principles. In doing so, he synthesized and integrated F.W. Taylor's principles of scientific management, Henry Fayol's 14 principles of administration, Mooney and Riley's principles, process and effect, ideas of Mary Parker Foley and V.A. Gracchus. So what he did was he integrated everything. He integrated principles of scientific management also, Henry Fayol's principles also, Mooney and Riley's principles also. We'll learn about Mooney and Riley in our next session. He integrated even ideas of Mary Parker Foley. So he integrated everything, and this is how he came up with 29 principles of organization. These are mentioned in alphabetical order for you. Again, you do not have to remember these by heart. Do not go on after learning these 29 principles. You just have to know what these principles stand for. For example, you have to know what scalar process means, you have to know what delegation means. So just know what these principles mean and you do not have to worry about anything else. So we are basically done with the formal list of principles. To revise, what we have learnt is 10 principles of organization given by Gulick, 7 elements of administration, that is nothing but Postcop, that is again given by Gulick, 8 principles of organization given by Urvik, and then again 29 principles of organization given by Urvik. So these were the 4 slides of principles that we saw in our previous slides. So moving on, we'll discuss some of the difficult principles now. Now some of the principles we have already dealt with in Fayol's session, like division of work or specialization or unity of command. So we'll not touch upon those. Please visit Fayol's session to learn about those. What we'll do is we'll learn only about those principles which we have not dealt with before. So moving on with our miscellaneous session. Theory of departmentalization. As we have seen, the second principle of the 10 principles of Gulick. Gulick gave us 10 principles of organization. Of that, second principle was basis of departments. It is also known as theory of departmentalization. Every organization can be departmentalized, can be divided into departments, and there are some bases to divide into these departments. So this is nothing but theory of departmentalization as given by Gulick. It is one of the important principles of administrative management. Now what is administrative management? It is another name for classical theory. If you remember, we have dealt with this in our very first slide of Henry Fayol. Administrative management is nothing but the another name for classical theory. Remember this. It gives us basis on which the work may be divided in an organization and departments be created. So if you have to divide the work and create departments, there are some bases that you must consider, and it gives us these bases. Gulick identifies 4 bases, popularly described as 4 P's of Gulick. So basically this is the third thing of Gulick that we are dealing with. First was 10 principles, second was 7 elements, that is Postcop, and among these 10 principles, the second principle stands for 4 P's, that is nothing but 4 bases. So what is this 4 P's? Purpose, process, persons and place. We'll learn about in detail now. The first P is purpose or function. What this means is divide your work and create a department which is based on some purpose. For example, welfare department. Welfare department has a purpose to take care of people. That is the purpose of the welfare department, to look after the welfare of the people. So it is nothing but the department based on purpose. So this is one of the bases. I hope you understand now. Purpose or function is one of the bases of departmentalization. Identify the major functions and goals of organization and create departments for each of these functions. So let's say for example there are 4 goals of an organization. So for every goal or function you create department. So there will be now 4 departments. So this is nothing but departmentalization based on purpose. So for example, welfare department, education department is another example. The purpose is education. Defense department is another example. The purpose is defending a nation or territory. So these are examples that are based on purpose. Advantages of such departments are that they are self-contained organization and low coordination costs are involved in running these departments. Such departments are more certain of attaining their goals because now you have divided your goals. For example, let's say there are 4 goals of an organization. Now you have created a department for each of the goals. So now attaining of those goals will be more easy. This is the advantage of such departments. These are the self-contained organizations. Such departments are nothing but self-contained organizations, and achievement of these goals are now more easy and more efficient. But there are also certain disadvantages, that is lack of possibility of further work division. You cannot divide the work further very efficiently. You can if you still want to, but possibility of such further work division is less. Failure to use updated technology, and there may not be enough work for specialists. So these departments are not basically meant for specialists. These are some of the disadvantages of such departments. So this is first base, that is the purpose or function. Moving on with our second base, that is nothing but process or skills. Some departments are created based on process or skill involved in its functioning. So whatever process or skill is involved, for example, Department of Engineering, it is a skill, it is a process based department. Department of Medicine, Department of Accounting, these are all process based departments. There are some particular skill set required for the functioning of these departments. As you can see, these are based on the process or a skill involved in its functioning. All work based on similar processes or skills are grouped together since it involves use of same knowledge, skills or processes. So all of those processes that require engineering or medical knowledge or accounting knowledge are grouped in respective departments. So these are nothing but process based departments. What are the advantages of process based departments? It brings together in a single office a large amount of each kind of work. It is possible to make use of most effective division of work and specialization. As you can see, Department of Engineering will be specialized in the process or skill of engineering. Department of Medicine or Department of Accounting will obviously be specialized in that particular field. So the biggest advantage of process based department is it brings in proper specialization, the actual specialization and proper division of work it brings in. This is the most important advantage of process based department. Secondly, it makes possible maximum use of labor and machinery for mass production. So this is the second important advantage of process based department. Major disadvantage, however, is it results in purposeless division and growth of departments. So instead of creating departments which are based on process, which would be purposeless division, we should basically more focus on other bases of departments. This is what Gulick and Narvik suggest, that process based departments are more effective division of work and they are more efficient specialized departments, but still they are purposeless division and they are purposeless growth of department. Moving on with our third base, this is nothing but persons or clientele. For example, old age welfare department, which has a particular kind of person that they serve, the old people. For example, Department of Refugees or Immigrants, Department of Farmers. So these are all persons based departments. They have a specific or particular kind of group of people that they serve, and this is how the departments are created. What is the advantage of such departments? The people who work in this department acquire specialized skills. Obviously, since you are dealing only with welfare of old people, so you are becoming now specialized in that. So people who work in this department acquire specialized skills over a period of time to serve that particular clientele. Disadvantage is coordination between such organizations become difficult on account of overlapping and duplication. As you can see, we have seen in our first base of purpose or function, that was the welfare department, which was the department based on purpose. Now a small part of that is old age welfare department. So there is, as you can see, some overlapping and duplication of work in each department, right? Department of welfare and Department of old age welfare. So coordination between such organizations become difficult on account of overlapping and duplication. This is nothing but a disadvantage of the persons base, the base of the persons or clientele based department. Moving on with our fourth base, that is nothing but place or territory. Fourth P that is given by Gulick is nothing but place. For example, district administration or tribal area department, this is nothing but place based departments, territory based departments. Here all functions performed in a given area are clubbed together and a department is created. So in a given area, whatever functions are there, they are clubbed together, and this is how a department is created. What is the advantage? Useful for intensive development of an area. For example, Department of Northeastern regions, that would look after only development of northeastern regions. So this is nothing but place based department. The members of such departments also become area specialists. They become specialists in that particular area. Disadvantages: such departments may suffer from lack of functional specialization and growth. What is functional specialization? This is the purpose based. Function is nothing but the purpose based. So there is no particular well defined purpose. The only basis of the department is the area. They still have their purpose or functions, but they lack from functional specialization. This is the disadvantage of the departments based on the purpose or territory as the base of their division. Now we'll look at some of the criticisms of departmentalization. What some critics have criticized about the theory of departmentalization. Some critics have said that these bases of departments are incompatible with each other. They do not go along with each other very well. As you can very well see in the above point itself, the department based on place does not acquire functional specialization. So they are incompatible with each other. Some critics have said that they are very vague in nature. They are not defined very properly. They are vague in nature. They overlap with each other is the criticism. For example, example, Department of Medicine, it can be classified as process based department because it involves skills. As if you remember, the second P was the process or skills. So Department of Medicine, Engineering, Accounting, these are all process based departments. So Department of Medicine can be classified as process based departments and also as purpose based department because there is a purpose behind its creation. There was a purpose behind the creation of Department of Medicine. So as you can see, there is a overlap between different bases. Next criticism is organizations grow according to the dictates of the situation. Thus, all four bases might even get adopted in a single organization. For example, Defense Department, as we know, is a purpose-based department. It is a function-based department. What is the purpose behind creation? That you have to defend the territory, you have to defend the nation. It is a purpose-based department, but it may have geographical subdivisions as basis of its working. For example, a subdivision in Northeast, a subdivision in Jammu and Kashmir. So these are the geographical subdivisions of Defense Department. So now it has been divided with respect to place or territory. They may have clientele subunits which looks after the welfare of war widows. So now they have been divided on the basis of people. The subunit of Defense Department which looks after war widows is nothing but departmentalization on the basis of people or clientele. Again, there may be accounts division which is nothing but skill specialization or process based division. So as you can see, all the four bases have been adopted in a single organization of Defense Department. Department of Defense was created by keeping in mind a base of purpose or function, but it has subdivisions of place, it has subdivisions of process, it has subdivisions of people. So all of the four bases are adopted in a single organization. This is the criticisms of theory of departmentalization. So moving on with our next miscellaneous term, that is single top executive or unity of direction. Now in Fayol's principles we have learned about unity of direction or unity of command. What Gulick and Ervik say is there should be single top executive. What this means is there should not be any board or commission. There are boards and commissions in organizations, right? What Gulick and Ervik say is there should be single top executive, only one person, one man or one woman. There should be single top executive. As you can see, belief that one director or executive should head organizations. Ervik warned against the use of committees for purpose of administration. He says that board and commissions are turned out to be failures. They are inevitably slow. The board and commissions are failures. They are inevitably slow. They are cumbersome. They are wasteful and they are ineffective. They do not cooperate with other agencies. Well-managed administrative unit in government are always headed by single administrator. This is what Ervik says. So there should be one person, one man or one woman. There should not be any board, there should not be any commission. This is nothing but the idea of single top executive or unity of direction as given by Gulick and Ervik. Moving on with our next miscellaneous topic, that is nothing but principle of staff. Now I have already told you what line and staff means in military organizations. Line organizations are nothing but which follow the scalar chain of hierarchy, the proper line of authorities. In military organization, if you say there are the commander-in-chiefs, the generals, the colonels, the lieutenants. So those are the line authorities. The staff authorities are the people who take care of kitchen, of veterinary activities, of transport. So those are the staff authorities. So we'll learn about those staff authorities in detail now. We'll not learn about line. What Gulick and Ervik most focused on was the principle of staff. The principle of staff is born out of principle of unity of command. When all authority rests with leader, he requires assistance in running the organization. As is very evident, if there is one chief executive or there is one leader who is leading the organization, he will require some assistance because he has too much of workload. So whoever assists them, whoever assists those chief executives are nothing but staff people, staff agencies and staff authorities. They help him in problem solving of his daily business. Before a problem comes to the executive, the staff authorities handle it and they break down the problem. They provide all the information to the executive about it and they give their advice about it. So they actually assist their leader or their chief executives in executing their day-to-day tasks. This staff assistance of the executive is of two categories, special staff and general staff. There are two types of staff, special and general. The chief executive requires the help of specialist as well as the general staff. So what is the specialist or the special staff? These are the experts who have to devote their time exclusively to the knowing, thinking and planning functions. They must not be given any administrative authority or responsibility, but they should get results by the authority of ideas. Their job is to render technical advice and provide timely and adequate information. So as you can see, the basic work of special staff is nothing but giving advice, rendering technical advice, giving information, timely and adequate information. This is the basic work of special staff. As we'll see in our next point, the work of general staff is exactly opposite to that of special staff, where special staff gives advice, general staff does not give any advice. So the job of special staff is just to render technical advice and provide proper and timely information. And as they are staff authorities, obviously they must not be given any administrative authority or responsibility, because authority and responsibility are the prerogatives of the line authorities or the line agencies. So special staff must not be given any administrative authority or responsibility, and these people devote their time exclusively to the knowing, thinking and planning functions. So they basically give advice to the executives or their leaders. These are the special staff. Next type of staff is the general staff. So public officials, these public officials are nothing but the line agencies, the line officials. So public officials in their everyday work do not have time to read, think and meet their subordinates. Hence, general staff assist them in the central task of command, control and coordination. So they assist them in command, control and coordination. They themselves do not command, control and coordinate. They assist their public officials, their line authorities in these tasks. Why? Because public officials do not have much time to read, think and meet the subordinates. So these works are basically done by general staff. So simply, general staff's basic work is just helping out, just assisting and nothing else. Special staff are specialist people who render advice, who give adequate and timely information. General staff just helps, just assists. As you can see, they should help to and coordinate the work of specialists also. The special staff are there. These are also helped by general staff. So general staff actually helps both the line authorities and the special staff. So they should help coordinate the work of specialists without themselves taking any specialized functions. So these are two types of staffs as dealt by Gulick and Urvik. That is nothing but special staff and general staff. We'll continue with the principle of staff. In assisting, these staff agencies, both general and special, in assisting, they act not on their own but as representative of their superior and within the confines of decision made by him. So they act as representative of their superiors. Thereby they relieve their top executives from the burden of day-to-day administration. They free him to concentrate upon the most important matters. Basically, they help him in executing their task more efficiently. This is the basic function of staff agencies. They lessen the burden of their line agencies. Urvik also recognized that in civilized life, assistants who act on behalf of top executive will often be regarded as encroaching upon the authority of senior official. To overcome this problem, Gulick suggests that assistant to be men with a passion for anonymity. So what Urvik says is, in a civilized life, in a daily life, in a day-to-day life, it might happen that the assistant who is working on the behalf of their executive as the representative of their superior, that assistant might be regarded as encroaching upon the authority of the senior officer, कि वो उसका काम ले रहा है, ज़्यादा बड़ा बन रहा है. These kind of criticisms might arise in day-to-day life. To this problem of Urvik, Gulick suggests that the assistants that you choose, those should be the men with a passion for anonymity. Your assistant should not go on Facebook and post every single thing that he is doing on behalf of the supervisors. So if you are a man with passion for anonymity, then you are perfect to be an assistant. This is what Gulick suggests that assistants should be chosen as. They should be chosen as men that have the passion for anonymity. So this is nothing but the principle of staff as dealt by Gulick and Urvik. Moving on to our next miscellaneous term, that is the principle of delegation. Now to explain this in very simple terms, you might already know what delegation means. Delegation means entrusting or giving out your authorities and responsibilities and powers to your subordinates. Not keeping all the powers in your hands, not having too much of centralization, giving out the powers and responsibilities to the subordinates. This is nothing but is meant by delegation. The principle of delegation emphasizes on the need of administrators to keep the requisite authority with them to act and delegate the rest of it to their subordinates. So whatever the proper amount of authority that is required for you to act, keep it with you, and whatever the rest that can be delegated should be delegated. This is nothing but the principle of delegation. Administrators must keep in mind to keep the requisite authority with them to act and delegate the rest of it to their subordinates. In the absence of such delegation, the subordinates cannot discharge their responsibility. So if you give responsibilities to your subordinates, you should also give them proper authorities. In the absence of such authorities, in the absence of such delegation, responsibilities cannot be discharged efficiently. This is nothing but very much similar to authority and responsibility principle of Henry Fayol. If you remember, Henry Fayol said that if you are giving someone some responsibility, you should also give them proper authority to execute those responsibilities. So it is nothing but the principle of delegation. In the absence of delegation, subordinates cannot discharge their responsibilities. So there should not be over centralization of powers in hands of one people or one group of people. There should be decentralization. Now what is the difference between delegation and decentralization? Delegation is a technique, delegation is a process, delegation is a method, and decentralization is what is achieved after proper delegation. I hope you understand this. Delegation is a technique of delegating powers, of giving out, entrusting powers to your subordinates, handing out your authorities to subordinates. That is nothing but the process or technique of delegation. And what happens when there is proper delegation from the topmost authority to the lowermost authority? If there is proper delegation, then you have achieved decentralization. So decentralization is an outcome. This is the difference between delegation and decentralization. So coming back to our topic of principle of delegation, Urvik maintains that lack of courage to delegate properly and knowledge of how to do it is one of the most general causes of failure in organization. So what Urvik says is, how organizations fail? They fail because there is lack of courage to delegate. Why there is lack of courage to delegate? Because sometimes managers or top executives think that this particular kind of work can be done very efficiently and effectively by only me and not by my subordinates. They do not trust their subordinates, and that is why they lack the courage to delegate properly. Sometimes they lack the courage to face the subordinates and tell them to execute some kind of work. So they lack the courage to delegate properly. Sometimes they lack the knowledge of how to do delegation. So this is how organizations fail. It is also emphasized the need to delegate responsibility of executives in whom authority is vested should be absolute, and that they should be personally accountable for the actions of their subordinates. So if you are delegating your authorities and responsibilities to subordinates, you are absolutely accountable for the actions of your subordinates. So it is your duty to see that the subordinates execute their work properly without any errors, because you are accountable for the actions of your subordinates. He also maintains that authority and responsibility must be coterminous, co-equivalent defined. As we have already seen, again I will repeat, in Fayol's second principle was authority and responsibility, and it is the same thing that is being repeated here. Urvik also maintains that authority and responsibility must be coterminous, co-equivalent defined. Thus, these authors emphasize the principle of correspondence of responsibility and authority. We saw this as one of the 8 principles of Urvik. One of the 8 principles of Urvik was principle of correspondence. So what is the principle of correspondence? There should be correspondence of responsibility and authority. Principle of delegation was one of the 10 principles of Gulick. Principle of correspondence was one of the 8 principles of Urvik. So you must understand what these principles stand for. If you do not remember exactly what 8 principles of Urvik were, if in exam you encounter principle of correspondence, this word, you must understand what principle of correspondence means or what principle of delegation means. So we have basically dealt with our principle of delegation. Moving on, principle of span of control is our next principle. It was the 10th principle of Gulick. If you remember, the last principle of Gulick was principle of span of control. We'll see what this means. This basically, in very simple terms, is nothing but how many subordinates you are able to monitor at a given time. Your span of control over the number of subordinates. How much attention you are able to give to the number of subordinates. This is nothing but span of control. We'll see it in more detail now. Emphasizes that a supervisor cannot control more than a certain number of subordinates. For example, let's say 10 or 20 or 50. If there are people of, let's say, 100 subordinates, those 100 subordinates cannot be handled by one team leader. A team of 100 people cannot be effectively handled by one team lead. So there is a certain number of subordinates only that a particular supervisor can control. This is nothing but span of control. Your span of control is limited as a human being, is the basic idea. This principle is based on the psychological conception of span of attention. When the number of subordinates increase arithmetically, there is a geometrical increase in all possible combinations of relationships which may demand the attention of supervisor. So basically, your span of attention is limited. If the number of people that you have to attend to increase, it becomes more complex to manage those people. Urvik says no supervisor can supervise directly the work of more than 5 or at the most 6 subordinates whose work interlocks. Urvik, however, was not dogmatic about the number. He said that the span of control is not a rigid rule. So what Urvik says is at the max one person can supervise 5 or let's say 6 people. But I am not dogmatic about this number. This is what Urvik says. This is not a rigid rule. This is what just I am saying for the sake of saying. I am just giving an example, and 5 or 6, these numbers are not a rigid rule, so span of control varies accordingly. While there is no agreement among the writers about the exact limit of span of control, Sir Ian Hamilton put the limit at 3 or 4. Some other authors put the figure at 10 or 12. So there is no particular common agreement among the writers. Various writers have given different figures for the span of control. Some say that one person can handle 5 or 6. Some say that one person can handle 3 or 4. Some authors even say one person can handle 10 or 12. So there is no proper agreement for the proper exact limit of span of control. Gulick, on the other hand, identifies various factors that may influence the optimum span. We saw Urvik said that there are 5 or 6 people that one person can supervise, which is again not a rigid rule. Gulick, on the other hand, identifies various factors that may influence this optimum span of control. These 4 factors are: first is capacity of an individual executive. Capacity means his intellect, his energy and his personality. If he is a more intellectual person, he will be able to monitor more people under him. So a capacity of an individual executive is one of the factors of span of control. Another factor is nature of work performed. For example, if it is a routine work, if it is a repetitive work, measurable work, or a homogeneous work, if it is such kind of routine and homogeneous or same kind of work, more people can be supervised effectively. So it also depends on the nature of work performed. It also depends on the stability of an organization. If an organization is stable, if it is in existence for a long time, if it has proper defined rules, principles and regulations, then less intervention is required from the supervisor. So there can be more span of control, there can be more span of attention. So stability of an organization is also a factor. Geographical proximity to those who are supervised is also another factor. More geographically dispersed group requires less regular contact and difficult to oversee the employees. For example, if you have a project team of 5 people, 2 of those people are in the USA, 2 of those people are in China, and 1 is in India who is monitoring those 2 people in USA and China. So this is a very geographically dispersed group, so there are less regular contact. What at the max you can do is daily conference call you can do. So there is a less regular contact, and hence it is very difficult to oversee the employees. So geographical proximity to those who are supervised is also one of the factors of span of control. This is the principle of span of control as handled by Gulick and Urvik. They said that there is a particular number of subordinates that a supervisor can handle. That is nothing but span of control. So moving on, I will stop this session here, and in the second part I will deal with the human factor and time in public administration and the criticisms of Gulick and Urvik's theory. So hope to see you in the second session. Link for the same would be in the description of this video. Peace out.